So good morning to all. So myself Professor T.M. Divakar, working as assistant professor in Department of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering in Sharad Institute of Technology, College of Engineering. So today we are going to see some fundamental rights and economical programs in that. So the fundamental rights we have already discussed in the previous videos. So let us come to the economical program. So whether at the local or national or international level, the economic policy has determinative implications for the enjoyment of human rights. So the policy choices made by governments and other powerful actors mark in difference between the life of dignity and one of the privatization and injustice for literally billions of people. So despite these facts, the human rights movement has until recently been hesitant to grapple with the politically continuous field of economic policies. However, when a teeny handful of elite individuals control more health than rest of humanity and countless millions are denied their most basic human rights. So this disconnect can no longer be ignored. So CSR is on the one guard of the bargaining movement, so that is seeking to bridge the long standing divide between human rights and economic policies. So in accordance with the human rights treaties that have been signed and ratified by almost all countries, the governments are required to mobilize the maximum of available resources for the fulfillment of human rights. So their economic policies are also subject to the precise standards of participations, transparency, accountability and non-discriminations. Moreover, these standards are applicable to both the nations and international human rights. Impact of economic policies, as governments are obliged to ensure such policies serves to advance rather than impede human rights in other countries. So much of the economic instability of recent years and the pervasive deep privations that continue alongside unprecedented level of wealth and can be traced back to the government's failures to comply with their human rights obligation in this regard. So, working in close collaborations with partner organization, the CESR is bringing human right standards to bear in design and implementation of economic policies around the world. The building on your pioneering work in monitoring compliance with economic and social rights standards, our austerity and its alternatives projects sees us calling governments to account for ill-conceived austerity programs in countries such as Ireland, Spain, Brazil, and South Africa. Next, our challenging fiscal injustice through the human rights project is bringing the tax justice and human rights communities together in a cohesive and dynamic movement, demanding justice in the generation and allocation of resources. So, CESR led the creation of the new initiatives for the principles and guidelines on the fiscal policies and human rights in Latin America and the Caribbean with a distinguished set of regional partners. So, in the immediate aftermath of the 2007 and 8 global financial crisis, it seemed the injustices of unfettered capitalized and the shortcoming of the economic planning that went with it could no longer be ignored. However, the international community has largely failed to learn the lessons of the collapse and the rise of fiscal austerity and the proliferations of the tax abuse are the new forms. So, CESR's Human Rights in Economic Policies program is challenging these unjust and unsustainable dynamics by uplifting the transformative power of human rights in economic policies making. So, ultimately economics must serve the need of ordinary peoples rather than the people being at the mercy of the economics in which they live. The financial crisis and increasing competitions for the ownership and control of natural resources have in many places translated in a serious denial of access to employment, education, health, social security, food, housing, water, and other basic necessity. Next one, they have also resulted in unprecedented flows of migrants and refugees. In such instances, women, children, indigenous peoples, migrants, and the member of disadvantaged and marginalized groups disproportionation suffers. So, this is exacerbated by the manifestations of discriminations and extremizations. So, moreover, the crises have often resulted in serious violations of civil and political rights when those excluded from the national development agendas protect against their long lasting abuse and discriminations. So, their call for a fair share of the pie and for dismantling structures of inequality is often met with force by those whose power and status quo are threatened. So, these issues points to the misalignment between the scope and impact of economic forces and actors on the one hand, and the political will and ability of the states to meet their human rights obligations by protecting against the human rights abuses on the other side. So, changing patterns in international foreign investment and increasingly powerful role of new economical entities present new challenges. So, these includes with regards to the corporate compliances, accountability and the responsibility to respect human rights. So, policies and programs relevant to the exploitation of natural resources and to the access and delivery of basic social services and goods, so such as healthcare, education, water, sanitation and housing are frequently pursued by states without sufficient recognition of their corresponding human rights obligations and responsibilities. So, specifically, the states often fail to comply with their obligations to formulate the development policies on the basis of the active, free and meaningful participations of their populations. So, limited awareness among the actors regarding the standards applications to business enterprises further embedded the effective preventions and mitigations of any negative impact on human rights due to the business activities. So, the globalized system such as international financial market and trades are run without human rights safeguards. So, among the factors behind the 2007 and 8 food crisis was the speculations in food commodities, and it is triggered by the influx in the international markets of investments fleeing the housing crisis. The sharp hikes in food prices were further exacerbated by export bans adopted by food exporting countries. The absence of human rights safeguards resulted in the serious food insecurity and hunger, particularly in food importing poor countries. The world was unprepared to preempt or rapidly respond to the negative fallout of the 2008 global financial crisis. Bailouts for financial institutions, often followed by austerity measures, constituted the prevailing policies response to the crisis, and this response, which was disproportionately felt by the marginalized groups and migrants. So, austerity measures were implemented with the limited political resistance in spite of growing the body of evidence that they threatened both the human rights and long term economical growth. The crisis revealed systematic flaws in the international monetary and financial architecture, including a lack of accountability for regulator and financial institutions. Since their adaptations at the Millennium Summit in 2000, the 8 Millennium Development Goals have raised the profile of poverty as an issue of international concern. So, however, a number of human rights gaps have been identified in both their design and implementation. As such, the MDGs deviated from aspirations and fundamental principles of 2000 Millenniums Declaration, which they were meant to realize. So, these gaps includes the lack of thematic balance with the disregard for the civil and political rights in areas such as personal security, administration of justice and political participations, pure specifications, especially in relation to their qualitative aspects and non-alignment of global goals, targets and indicators with the human rights standards, inappropriate adaptation of the global goals to national context, failure to address discriminations and increasing inequalities, the weak accountability for both process and outcomes, and non participatory processes and disregard for process aspects in general. The next one is the economic and human rights. That is the Reynold Dworkin in 1978 considered human rights as a being essentially a mechanism protecting minorities from the decision taken by majority of their own profit, but resulting in a loss for the former. So, this definition is very important because it means that the enrichment of one part of the world, for example, cannot be rightfully pursued at the expenses of the material, cultural and spiritual impoverishment of the another part, especially if this constitutes its weakest link. So, asserting economic rights should not therefore be taken as an equivalent to maximizing utility, or rather social utility should not be mistaken for aggregate utility. So, this clearly tells us that economic goal must be redefined. Take productions, for example, indeed producing one particular commodity having in mind the satisfaction of consumers' demand or citizens' requests. In other words, the assertion of the human rights are two different concepts, even if the products themselves might be perfectly similar and the actual protection also undertaken in similar fashion. So, within economic mainstream thought, meeting effectively and viable demand is satisfying enough as a social role for the procedure and that part of the populations which is consequence is deprived of access to one particular commodity on account of budget constraint should not be the concern. On the contrary, in case of human rights assertions through the supply of the same commodity, no one should be left out, and regardless of the budget constraints. On the one side, private demand is being met because its nature is mainly individual, and other hand the public demand is being met because its contrast in its nature is now mainly social and or collective. So therefore, according to the corporate logic, meeting private demand is a normal procedure, whereas the meeting public demand is not. When aiming at the integration of the human rights, the methodology used by economic needs to shift away from the concept of satisfying the specific demand created by an individual to the more inclusive concept of satisfying the overall needs of the community, which means taking into the considerations the demand created by an individual as a whole, regardless of whether or not this same demand is strictly viable. The second side of this conflicting interpretation of the relationship between the economic and human right concern the idea that promoting human rights, economic, social and culture as much as civil and political, depends on sound economic performance. So this interpretation is particularly fallacious of two main purposes. First of all, throughout history, human rights have essentially been fought for, not received, and therefore it is simply delusion to take the human rights as some sort of trickles down effect of economic performance. So indeed, human rights, women's rights to vote, the right to form the trade unions, or right to paid holidays, for instance, resulted, as we have pointed out, from collective movements staking their claim to these rights and frequently violating disputed as a matter of fact and not from the simple economic growth. So secondly, accepting the dependence of human rights on economic performance would inevitably lead us to cynical dead end. So indeed, if on one hand promoting human rights as a principal goal may constitute an obstacles to good economic performance according to the cost arguments, and if on the for the other hand human rights results from the sounding economic performance, then the best way to promote the human rights should logically be so. With this, today's lecture is over. Thank you.